Well,
Hello, good afternoon.
how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Adrian. How are you?
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you. I'm very well. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for coming. Hi, Shonda and Maddie. Okay.
Hello,
Hi. Sorry. Um, I think it's only the four of us right now. Perhaps we can wait for maybe 3 more minutes just to give everyone a chance to join in, and then we can get started. Sounds good?
Excellent. No
All right.
problem.
Thank you.
Hi, Sarah. Nice to see you.
Hi, Adrian. Nice to see you. I
I think we've spoken over a voice call, but never a Zoom
yes,
call.
yes, it's nice to see you. How are you doing?
Very good, very good. About to wrap up the 10-month project.
I know it's gone so quickly.
Yeah,
And I know
yeah.
you've had well, we can talk about that at a different time, some ups and downs, but I saw the email and I thought, let me join in here a little bit more about what you've been doing.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, I'm excited.
Okay, guys, thank you for your patience. I think we've waited enough minutes. We can get started. Dr. Bodian is not here yet, but hopefully he'll join us soon. Um, hey, Sarah, how are you?
I'm good, Aline. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm just gonna turn on my camera. Now I can see me.
Oh, there you are. Yes. Perfect.
Hi,
Ni-
Sarah. How you
Nice.
doing?
I'm good. I'm good. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
I missed
Always a
you in
pleasure.
in Dakar.
Yeah, that's right. Were you at the ETA seminar?
No, I went for the IEA seminar
Oh,
with Diane um
okay.
but also in April. So I
Okay,
got to see everyone. We had a wonderful time. I'm
great.
ready to go back.
I'm happy. I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to series 15 of the Fulbright Enrichment Seminar. We've been doing it for a couple years now. So today is series 15, and I'm very excited about it. And my name is Alyun Sen, Associate Coordinator of the Fulbright Program in Sub-Saharan Africa, and it's my pleasure to serve as a moderator for today's seminar. So the topic is tracing the boundaries of dialect and social variation in Cabo Verdean Creole, traditional Deep Creole and modern Portuguese influence on Light Creole. The Fulbright program was founded on the belief that mutual understanding between people and cultures is one of the most powerful tools for building a more peaceful and interconnected world. So today's seminar embodies that mission by exploring how language reflects history, identity, education, social mobility, and cultural change. Cabo Verdean Creole or Kriolu, Adrian, I think is the pronunciation right? I hope so. Kriolu is much more than a means of communication. It carries centuries of history connecting African linguistic traditions with Portuguese colonial influence and the lived experience of generations of Cabo Verdeans. At the same time, it raises important questions about language policy, access, social inclusion, and cultural preservation in an increasingly globalized world. We are honored to have with us today Professor Adrian Riccelli, whose Fulbright research examines dialect variation, sociolinguistic change, and the evolving relationship between Cabo Verdean Creole and Portuguese across the islands of Cabo Verde. So through teaching, field research, and interviews conducting throughout the archipelago, Professor Riccelli is helping us better understand how language evolves and how communities negotiate questions of identity and belonging through language. He's an assistant professor of Spanish and Portuguese linguistics at the State University of New York at Buffalo. His research focuses on how languages change and vary over time, especially in communities where multiple languages are spoken or in contact with each other. He studies varieties of Spanish and Portuguese, including US Spanish, Afro-Hispanic Spanish, and mostly Cabo Verdean Creole. His goal is to understand the linguistic, cognitive, social, and historical factors that drive language variation and change. He's not here yet, but we will be also delighted to welcome Dr. Momodou Bodian as our guest speaker. And we hope that Dr. Bodian's expertise and perspective will enrich today's discussion and help us connect these linguistic questions to broader cultural and social contexts. So before we begin, I encourage everyone to think about the role language plays in your own community. How does language shape identity? How does it influence access to education and opportunity? And how do societies balance preserving linguistic heritage while adapting to social and economic change? With that, it is my great pleasure to introduce Professor Adrian Riccelli.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you all. And do let me know if I start coming up on the time frame, the 10, 15 minutes. 'Cause sometimes I get carried away and talk a lot and lose track of time. Um, Yeah, so thank you for that excellent introduction. And just to clarify these terms, deep Creole and light Creole, this is the way that Cape Verdeans themselves refer to sort of the different lex or registers of Cape Verdean Creole. So deep Creole, Kriolu Fundo, is a sort of the more conservative in terms of not having changed a lot in the modern era, and it preserves the most African influence and is the most linguistically different from modern Portuguese. Whereas light Creole and deep Creole tends to be spoken in rural areas by elderly speakers, although younger speakers from rural areas can also access this register. And light Creole tends to be the more modern variety of Creole spoken in the urban areas, although you know, Praia and Mindelo are the two urban centers of Cabo Verde. They're relatively small compared to a lot of other global cities, but they do have an urban sort of feel to them. They have an urban organization to them. And so light Creole is the most Portuguese influenced and has experienced the most language change over time, um, in a big way influenced by modern Portuguese and especially modern European Portuguese. So just to situate you geographically, this is the Cabo Verde archipelago. I'm sure if you've been following the World Cup, they're currently the Cinderella story, playing tonight at 11 p.m. local Cabo Verde time, so a little bit late, but yeah, hopefully they'll find a win over Saudi Arabia to be well placed in the eliminatorias in the elimination round. And so just to the east is the African continent, the African mainland. The closest countries on the mainland are Mauritania, Senegal, Gambia, and Guinea-Bissau. And as you can see, there's 10 islands. Santa Lucia is uninhabited, as is this other islet, but all the other major islands are inhabited, and each one has its own variety or really collection of dialectal varieties of Criollo Cabo Verdeano. But they do organize into two sort of major groups. Down here you have the Sotavento varieties, which is Santiago, Maio, Fogo, Brava. And then up here you have the Barlavento varieties, which are Santo Antão, São Vicente, São Nicolau, Sal, Boa Vista. And then those two poles are centered on the two major urban centers, so Praia, the capital, on the island of Santiago, and Mindelo on São Vicente. Those are sort of like the most prominent varieties that share a lot in common with the Sotavento and Barlavento group, respectively. And currently, I'm here in Santo Antão, which is incredible. It's beautiful. I don't know if you can see the mountains behind me, but there's incredible hiking, and it's the greenest of because Cabo Verde suffers a lot of issues of drought, and Santo Antão is the greenest of them all. Yeah, so 9 inhabited islands, as I mentioned. In the Sotavento group, it's usually called Criolu. The variety from the island of Santiago is called Badiou. And then the northern varieties tend to delete the U and the E at the end of words. So it's called Criol. Um, and basically since its inception, but especially since the start of the 20th century, there's been a sort of daily tension between Criollo and Portuguese, in the sense that sort of Portuguese, as we'll get into more detail about in the next slide, is sort of the official formal language of international business and government, whereas Criollo is the native language of all Cape Verdeans. And so Kriolu is what linguists tend to call a Creole language. So in this case, it's Portuguese based. We would say Portuguese is the lexifier because it provides the majority of the lexicon or vocabulary. And in particular, the first variety from the island of Santiago formed very early in the 15th century, but some of the other ones formed a bit more recently, like the variety from São Vicente, São Vicente, is formed as recently as the 18th century. But in each case, the base vocabulary is based on Portuguese from somewhere in that time period, depending on what island we're talking about. whereas the grammar and the pronunciation differ substantially from modern varieties of Portuguese, like that in Brazil or Portugal or Angola, um, to the extent that if a native Portuguese speaker lands in a Criollo Cabo Verdeano conversation, they'd be able to pick up on some things, but it's not mutually intelligible. It's an autonomous, separate language, despite that obvious connection with the vocabulary. So the formation of Criolu and Creole languages in general, at least in the case of the Atlantic, was in the context of slavery exploitation colony in the colonial era. And in the case of Cabo Verde, the primary African languages that came to influence the development of the language and contribute to this transformation of the grammar and pronunciation are primarily Fula, Mandinka, Wolof, Biafada, among several others, all spoken on the adjacent mainland that I mentioned just before. And then as sort of the dialects spread out, so first they formed on Santiago, and then they spread throughout Sotavento, and then they spread to Barlavento. And so the variety spoken on Sal, for example, didn't really consolidate in any major way until the 20th century. Good. And so, as I mentioned, Portuguese and Criollo exist in sort of different social registers and different social spheres. Criollo is the native language, the home language, the mother tongue of all Cape Verdeans. And so it's the language of informality, of family, of peer interaction. It's maximal cultural and emotional expression. All the greatest Cape Verdean poetry and music is in Criollo, or at least in the case of literature, it's in Portuguese with a lot of Criollo, spread throughout. But all the popular music is in Criollo, all the traditional music is in Criollo, and it's spoken at home, it's spoken in the community, it's spoken on the street in everyday life. Like Cape Verdeans of all social, the whole range of social categories. Whereas Portuguese is the language of formality, government, and education, foreign relations, social distance, international business, and it's functionally the language of literacy and upward mobility. All schooling from day one, public schooling at least, well, all schooling in Cabo Verde is in Portuguese, and it's a variety of Portuguese that's very close to European Portuguese. Since, keep in mind, it is a young country, it's only been independent since 1975. It wasn't that long ago that it was, literally part of Portugal. And in terms of the sort of range of social characteristics associated with, you would say, Criollo Portuguese bilingualism, speakers that are more elderly or more rural or have less educational attainment tend to be sort of less fluent or have less experience with Portuguese. And so this can create a lot of issues for accessing services, educational opportunities, and even interacting with relatives and friends and community members in the diaspora, which is it's not just an emotional thing. Your connections to the diaspora, your remittances are incredibly important for the Cabo Verdean economy. And so your connections to the diaspora could be a crucial lifeline. And if you don't have them, you might have a lot of difficulty in terms of finances and well-being. So there's a lot of sort of both practical and sort of linguistic theoretical questions surrounding Criollo Cabo Verdeano. So not only for Criollo, but for all these languages that linguists call languages, such as Creole or Jamaican Patois or Suriname Togo in Suriname, among many others. The precise sort of steps and process by which formation of these languages came to be is still hotly debated. It's still not completely and fully understood. In terms of Cabo Verde specifically, this process of dialect diversification across the archipelago is also very hotly debated and still not fully understood, and especially for some of the varieties like here in Santo Antão or San Nicolau or Java, there just hasn't been much research at all. And then there's the practical issue in terms of officialization of Kriolu, because it's official only on paper. In any practical sense, it doesn't exist in the formal academic or judicial or legislative or business realm, except for, I shouldn't say it doesn't exist, right? So public school teachers will use it in their lectures to clarify topics, but all the materials, all the assessments are in Portuguese, right? So there is kind of a general, I wouldn't say consensus, but there's a wide understanding that in terms of educational outcomes, it could be good to have more presence of Kriolu, more writing of Kriolu, more metalinguistic analysis of Kriolu in the education pipeline from the beginning, right? Because these kids experience very little Portuguese until about first grade, until they're thrown into a public school, and then all of a sudden everything's in Portuguese. And so you can imagine how difficult it can be to learn in certain subjects if you were just thrown into a language that is honestly a different language. And sometimes it's even more confusing than if it were a completely different language, because a lot of the similarities make it difficult to separate, where Criolu ends and where Portuguese begins. So in the debate over officialization and the practical application of officialization, there's a lot of tension regarding which dialectal variety should have prominence. All the other islands sort of resent Badiou, variety from Santiago Island and from the capital of Praia. Because it seems to have had precedence thus far in, for example, the development of an official writing system, orthography called Alupec. And then similarly, right, it's not clear if there should be, okay, maybe we should have one poll in Mindelo and another in Praia, but then the other Sotavento and Barlavento varieties feel slighted. So there's a lot of tension and debate, and honestly, it prevents any progress from happening. This issue of the dialect diversity and which should be represented or not in the officialization process. And then in terms of the diaspora, and in terms of the ever increasing, ever prominent influence of Portuguese, there's this issue that a lot of sort of like traditional ways of speaking Criollo, a lot of traditional folk knowledge and customs are rapidly being lost. And especially because I don't think I mentioned the Cape Verdean diaspora is almost 1 million, whereas the population of the country itself is about 500,000. So you can imagine the diaspora is pretty much double the population of the country. So it has a major impact because also Criollo maintenance by second and third generation Cape Verdeans in the diaspora is also difficult. Okay, so for the project, it was a teaching and research project. I've been here in Cabo Verde since September, and the first half of it, I was in Praia, in the capital city. In the original proposal, I had proposed to teach like 5-week modules in 3 different classes, but the needs of the they needed me to cover a full course, so I took over full duties for Linguistica Cabo Verdeana which is the second in a series of language and linguistics classes that's part of the Portuguese and Cape Verdean Studies major in Uniceve, Universidade Cabo Verde. And so most of the students in the Portuguese and Cape Verdean Studies program have the professional goal of becoming Portuguese language teachers. And so that was the first half of the project. The second half of the project is research-based. And so I've been hitting most of the other islands, most of all the islands, to conduct field work, to collect sociolinguistic interviews, which I'll explain what those are a little bit more in turn, and also picture description narratives. And this is because my dissertation work from 10 years ago now, wow, was all based on Badiou, on the Santiago variety of Cape Verdean Creole, the pronoun system of that variety. But so now I finally have the opportunity to expand it to the other dialectal varieties. And if you'd like later, I can explain why Sal and Boavista are the only two islands that I won't be visiting, other than time. There are some other reasons why those are the only two islands that I'm not visiting in this trip. Um, and eventually, I also hope that the some of the materials, some of the data that I'm collecting will contribute to sort of like multilingual didactic manuals that archive, celebrate, and promote examples of traditional Criollo Cabo Verdeano from different dialectal varieties, as well as some of the folk knowledge related to food production and processing, fishing, even like building of dams and like terraced hillsides for growing crops and stuff like that. Good. So one of the challenges that I encountered in the teaching phase was the related to the professional goal that I understood most of the students to have, which was that they wanted to be Portuguese language teachers. And so I kind of got the sense that, you know, they worked hard, they did their work, but I got the sense that they were kind of just trying to get through the course and get their grade and move on, which is fine. You know, I understand that's undergraduate students all over the world, right? Yeah, I did my best to emphasize that a deep understanding of Kriolu linguistics, dialect variation, and the social situation that I explained that exists in vis-a-vis Portuguese would help them to become better Portuguese teachers. And I kind of tried to give examples of how they could apply their knowledge of Kriolu linguistics to teaching Cape Verdean students Portuguese language, right? For example, what I mentioned with respect to keeping the two systems apart, me as a I spoke English and Spanish, and I started learning Portuguese as a third language, and shortly thereafter Criollo, and so I still have trouble sometimes keeping the two systems separate between Criollo and Portuguese. So you know, it's sometimes a blurry boundary. Another issue that I encountered was like in the second week of classes, you know, I had gotten some of the materials to prepare the classes from other professors, but not for every single week, not for every single topic. So when it came to make my own PowerPoint slides, I wrote them using Alupec, and I tried to do it in a way that adhered to like traditional Santiago Criollo patterns of pronunciation and representation. And immediately, this was incredibly grating and contentious among the students. They became very distracted from the actual content I was trying to teach, and instead would debate, you know, how to spell certain things, if how to represent certain words, certain pronunciations, and so forth. I quickly decided to do what most other Cape Verdean professors do, and that is at least write the slides in Portuguese, even if you might be lecturing in Criollo. Because honestly, all my immersion in the Lusophone world has been in Cabo Verde. So my spoken Criollo is better than my spoken Portuguese, although my written Portuguese is very good. It was easier for me to lecture in Criollo, but I quickly learned that the slides themselves should be in Portuguese. And you know, I don't think it was just my spelling decisions. I think this was also very grating to the students because of this social dynamic between the two languages, where they're just not used to seeing Criollo in that context. They're just not used to encountering university lecture slides in the language. So they found it, you know, it created a kind of cognitive dissonance for them. But I wanted, you know, my main goal was the content, right? And so I found it much easier to just leave the distractions aside, except for certain moments when it would, illuminate some issue of pronunciation or language change in the language in Criollo, and to really focus on the content as much as possible. I saw something in the chat. Maybe there's a warning about time. Oh, okay. Thank you, Sarah. Have a good one. Thank you for coming. Okay, so let me move a little faster here. As a potential solution, I tried to instill this kind of empirical mindset about language that linguists are usually trained to view language with, and to sort of combat the traditional stigma, the traditional ideologies that tend to surround not just Creole, but all Creole languages and really all vernacular languages across societies, especially in the global South, if you will, where not so much nowadays, and less so in Cabo Verde and in other countries like maybe Jamaica or Haiti or other places like that. But traditionally, yes, Criollo was thought of as like a broken or degenerate Portuguese, and that was part of sort of the colonialist ideologies surrounding the language and the separations between Criollo and Portuguese. Although in the modern day, I think Cabo Verde has in fact gotten past that in a major way. And now the main issue is the one I mentioned with respect to which dialects should have precedence in officialization. But in any event, I tried to instill this sort of empirical mindset when describing and thinking about Criollo and language in general, to sort of push back against some of those lingering preconceptions about Criollo vis-a-vis Portuguese. We also did a lot of training in transcription, both using the Alupec official orthography and using the International Phonetic Alphabet, which is a collection of symbols that linguists use to represent natural speech sounds, such that you can sort of read a transcription in IPA, and even if it's a language you don't speak, you can understand how it would be pronounced in that language. And then also tried to emphasize, again, sort of from an empirical perspective, issues of cognitive storage and processing of language, as well as the social forces that drive linguistic structural variation and change over time, and sort of the principles of historic language change rooted in those linguistic systemic patterns of variation. And later, if you want, I can clarify what I mean by variation. In general, I just hope that the students will come away with this empirical mindset, this objective mindset, view thinking about language as an issue of language science. Good. And then the research phase of the project is, as I mentioned, centered around documenting the various dialects of Cape Verdean Creole, documenting the way that everyday Cape Verdeans from different islands, from different regions of each island, speak Criolu in their daily lives. And so the classic way that sociolinguistics go about getting that kind of data is called the sociolinguistic interview, which is really the objective is just to stimulate a relaxed, everyday kind of conversational style. So you ask the speaker different things about their childhood, their daily life, their tastes, their preferences, some of their views about society and culture, anything that'll kind of get them just speaking in a normal way that they would in their daily lives. Ideally, in addition to eliciting the vernacular, in addition to eliciting the naturalistic way that people speak in their daily lives, we also want to collect some information sort of indirectly through that interview about the social category, the social lives of the speakers. So in terms of educational attainment, in terms of sort of like socioeconomic status or class, right? Age, dialect region, gender, even like stylistic disposition, all of these things can influence linguistic variation and change. So it's important to have an understanding of those categories and how they influence the way that the speaker speaks. And then also with some speakers, though not all, I collect a picture description narrative, which is just like a series of animations, a series of drawings that convey a story, and I ask them to narrate the sequence of events in the drawings. But that that works better with literate speakers and with younger speakers. Some speakers, especially elderly speakers, and those who have less educational attainment, have a more difficult time sort of narrating the sequence of events. They tend to instead just describe each scene in isolation, or not quite understand what it is I'm asking them to do. So I don't try to get that with all speakers, but what I can do to get that because it's a different discourse style. It represents a different way of organizing naturalistic speech from the conversational style. So, good. And as I mentioned, my previous research is all with the Badiou variety from the island of Santiago. So I wanted to expand the sample, if you will, to include seven of the other dialect varieties, six of the other dialect varieties. And again, the ultimate objective is to test how various social cognitive, remember, because language is a system for communicating our underlying thoughts, and it's part of our natural endowment in human cognition. And then linguistic structural factors, how all of these come together to influence variation and change over time in Kriolu. And this, of course, implicates the issue of bilingualism with Portuguese that I mentioned prior. Good. And so by doing that, we can learn all sorts of things about the historical development of Kriolu, Cabo Verdean, and where it might be going in the future. Good. And some of the challenges in the research phase are, one is just kind of a standard issue that especially community outsiders can face in sociolinguistics research or linguistic anthropological type research, which is just it can be challenging to just find people who want to sit and talk to you in that way. But I've really been fortunate to have encountered different individuals on each of the islands that have really helped me recruit and sometimes even interview the participants. And usually they're kind of like well-connected community members that know a lot of people, and they've been really essential in helping me get the targeted number of recordings that I wanted from each island. Um, and another issue is that I learned the variety from the island of Santiago, and as I mentioned before, there's kind of some tensions, regional tensions, with respect to that variety, as well as just practical comprehension issues like the varieties from Santo Antão and São Vicente are pretty challenging if you're not familiar with some of the main linguistic properties. I still have trouble understanding speakers from Santo Antão, from São Vicente, from São Nicolau when they speak quickly. Especially here in Santo Antão, I've had an associate, a colleague who is a native speaker, a local community member who's really been helping me a lot, especially carry out the interviews. And yeah, and so in addition to the importance for research and education in Cabo Verde, I think that this research has a lot of value, and the application of the research in education and in policy has a lot of value for all sorts of nations, especially those in the global south, those with large international diasporas that face similar challenges with respect to the loss of traditional folk ways of speaking, folk knowledge, and with challenges in language maintenance in second and third generation speakers in the diaspora, as well as in other Creole speaking societies. The dynamic is the same, right? In Haiti, with Haitian Creole and French, it's the same challenge. and so on and so forth. Jamaican patois with sort of a international received pronunciation, UK model English versus Jamaican patois. They face similar challenges to Cabo Verde. So especially for those kind of nations, but also for other, it also applies to continental Africa, where right, you have often, depending on the country, right, colonial era language, often a European language that is used as like the form of intercultural communication and the official language of education and policy and business. Whereas the pre-colonial African languages, although not, there's plenty of them that are not endangered or anything like that. But there could be some loss of both language maintenance and sort of traditional folk ways, folk knowledge, community knowledge, and that kind of stuff. Um, and as we mentioned, the issue of educational equity. So, I think it's very obvious that if the Cape Verdean public school system treated Portuguese as what it is, as a second language, and used Kriolu as the main medium of instruction, but still had, Portuguese present, and it's clear, Cape Verdean parents want Portuguese, they want French, they want English to be present in the public school curricula. But I think it would make sense from a pedagogical perspective to treat them as second languages and start from the very beginning. Keep the Portuguese there, keep the French there, keep the English there, but most of the materials, right? And when you're teaching other subjects like mathematics or in other subjects, I think it would be better for educational attainment to have most of that stuff be in Creole. And every country faces the issue of the dialect diversity problem. It's just that we've forgotten all the tensions surrounding it in countries that have long had, sort of a standardized official register for several centuries. And then finally, again, the ultimate goal of linguistics research is to describe, principles of language cognition, principles of language and society, and how they influence language structure and language change over time. On a human level, right, across all languages and societies. We don't want to just describe Criollo or just Spanish or just Wolof. We want to describe, human language as a unifying system. Okay, so sorry if I went over time. Muito obrigado, and I'm happy to answer any questions or clarify any issues. And thank you again for letting me share with you.
Thank you, Professor Richelli, for this fascinating presentation. And you did not go over time. That's perfectly fine. So what struck me most is how this research really shows that language is never simply about grammar, or vocabulary. As we mentioned with your students who just, seem to, like you said, like any graduate, any college student just try to get through the course and get the grade. So, is very deeply connected to questions of identity, education, social mobility, and cultural preservation, And your work also highlights a very important tension that many multilingual societies face, how to preserve linguistic diversity while navigating the realities of globalization and formal education system. So I was very interested in your observations about, once again, students' reaction, to seeing Kriolu written in Alupec and, what that reveals about language, attitudes, and social norms in educational spaces. It also reminds us that language policies are ultimately about people, perceptions, and power as much as they are about linguistics. Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. I'm going to just let the audience, if anybody has questions for Professor Richelli. I did not turn my camera, I'm sorry. Any questions for Professor Richelli after this wonderful presentation?
Even if it's about the World Cup, I'm happy to.
So okay, guys, so maybe, if you need time to think about it, that's okay. I'll just go ahead and start, and perhaps give you more time, if you want to think about questions you may have. So this, has nothing to do with the presentation, but which team are you rooting for between Portugal, Cabo Verde, and I'm guessing the US?
Yeah, Cabo Verde all the way, Cabo Verde all the way. It's beautiful to see. There's flags everywhere. Everybody's got their flag out. There's like a cultural community center here I'm in a town called Ribeira Grande on Santo Antão, and they show every game at the cultural center. But when Cabo Verde plays, it fills up, and yeah, it's really wonderful to see. Just the way that it's putting Cabo Verde on the map and the way that it's really making people feel. It's doing a lot to combat that sort of regionalism, where sometimes Cabo Verdean identity is more about I'm from this island rather than I'm Cape Verdean, and this is, I kind of feel, bringing together Cape Verdeans as like under one national identity.
Right, right. Very good, very good. Thank you for that answer. So my first questions is, for people unfamiliar with Cabo Verde, what surprised you most during your field work? People like me. So the question is like, with the field work you've been doing, what was the most surprising thing for you?
Yeah, I mean, really, like I said, I had only, when I came for my dissertation fieldwork, it was in 2015, 16, and 17. And I was only on the island of Santiago and then Mayu for like one weekend. So really, it's just been like discovering the unique identity of each island. Um, I just didn't realize, yeah. I also didn't realize, so there's a little bit less tourism in the southern group in Sotavento, but Mindelo and here in Santo Antão has a lot of tourism. Um, the I haven't been to Sal and Boa Vista. Sal is the island that has like these all-inclusive resort hotels that the tourists come and they never leave the hotel area and it's all kind of contained there. The tourism here in Santo Antão is more like hiking tourism. So I've been surprised to see that dynamic in these islands in Barlavento. But yeah, also just the what else? It's also amazing. So there's an amazing uniformity in terms of the cuisine, right? So lots of grilled fish. Cachupa is the national dish. It's like stewed beans and corn with a bunch of other ingredients in it as well. But those are like universal sort of dishes across the archipelago that are truly beloved. What else? Yeah, no, there's a lot of um, yeah, a lot of cultural practices and customs that, despite the unique identity of each island, are shared throughout the archipelago, and despite the incredible dialect diversity, are shared throughout the archipelago. What else has surprised me? Um, yeah, just the feeling of being on some of the more being in some of the more isolated areas of the different islands. So, Brava Island, you can only get to by ferry, by boat from Fogu Island. And so when you're there, there's very few tourists, and you really are like completely immersed in Brava society, and you feel like you're kind of removed from the rest of the world. Um, as I mentioned, here in Santo Antão, there's a little bit more tourism, but you can go to some areas that are very isolated. Like I went to this one area called Figueiras, that it was like an 8 kilometer hike to get there. The only other option is on a boat, that like a little lancha, a little rowboat type situation. So being in those kinds of spots is also an incredible feeling. You really feel like you're disconnected from the rest of the world and totally immersed in this little bubble um, of Cape Verdean culture and society. Um, yeah.
Right, right. Well, that's beautiful. Thank you for that answer. Um, I'm going to move on to question number two. Is that okay? Yeah. Did you find that younger speakers um, view Kriolu differently from older generations?
Definitely, definitely. So the
Mhm.
major factor is independence, pre-independence, post-independence, which I mentioned is 1975 is when Cabo Verde became an independent nation. And before that, the situation was institutional neglect, right? So there were very few, there was only, less than five public schools in Cabo Verde across the whole archipelago prior to independence in the 20th century. Especially like, yeah, speakers that went through their schooling years prior to independence. Most of them, in fact, did not go to school, right? So they have very little functionality in Portuguese. Whereas the young generation, Cabo Verde actually has really good literacy rates. And so pretty much all younger speakers are bilingual to varying degrees. Like I said, if they're a little bit from a rural area, if they have a little bit less educational attainment, they might have a little bit of difficulty, let's say, or you notice more of the Creole influence in their Portuguese if they come from that kind of background, but they'll be bilingual to some extent. Um, so that definitely affects the differences between older and younger speakers in a major way. Um, Similarly, younger speakers are, they still value Criollo, especially, like I said, in the cultural sphere, right? Like for music, popular music to be kind of authentic, Cape Verdean popular music to be authentic, it's got to be in Criollo. It's still like that code of maximal cultural and emotional expression. Um, but they're also very, young people have a lot of goals and aspirations for professional success in their lives, right? So they very much want to be in touch with the diaspora, learn French, learn English, learn Dutch, and so on and so forth, learn Portuguese in a way that comes off as a native Portuguese speaker rather than a Criollo Portuguese bilingual. So those also are factors that affect the way that young people differ from elderly speakers in terms of how they think about and use and view Criollo. Um,
Thank thank you. Thank you once again for that great answer. And for the audience, if you want to interrupt and ask a question, feel free anytime, or you're welcome to just write it on the chat if you have a question. Um, Adrian, what aspects of Cabo Verdean culture for you do you think are at risk if certain dialects disappear in the future?
yeah, yeah. So aside from the dialects themselves,
Mhm.
the the modern cultural influences from the diaspora, from technology, threaten the loss of a lot of incredible Cape Verdean popular knowledge. I mentioned some examples like, for example, just like uh, fishing and arming boats and processing seafood in the agricultural realm of especially here in Santo Antão, there's a lot of sugarcane production, yams, potatoes, iname, which is called malanga in Spanish. I don't know how you would say iname in English, actually. Um, Maybe the same way. Um, but lots of corn. There's just like an incredible they make like these terraced hillsides to be able to grow crops on a mountainside that you're like, how can anybody possibly make arable land out of this like rocky mountain crag? There's just like an incredible amount of resourcefulness and industriousness in the agricultural realm, in the fishing realm, also in construction, all kinds of construction of like dikes and, as I said, those terraces and even homes, um, all sorts of, and then even some of like traditional folk tales, fairy tales, those kind of things, and just yeah, just that sense of like of industriousness, of versatility in terms of being like a jack of all trades, right? In terms of self-sustaining lifestyle, um, that kind of stuff.
Right, right. And last question for me. How has the Fulbright experience contributed to your research and professional development?
Oh, it's huge. It's really a game changer. So, it's the first time I've taught a full course in a mix of Portuguese and Kriolu.
Mm,
Um, it's the first time I've been able to formally teach a class outside the United States. I learned so much about what I was saying about the boundaries between Portuguese and Criollo in everyday life. I learned a lot about because my previous research was all focused on sort of the grammar of the pronoun system in Santiago Criollo. So I learned all
mm,
sorts of stuff about the phonology, the pronunciation system, about the dialect varieties. Um, yeah, it's completely changed all aspects of
right.
my teaching and research agenda. Yeah.
Mm. Thank you again. Well, since we're not having any more questions, at least from the audience, I'm thinking that's probably because your presentation was wonderfully clear. And I would like to thank you, Professor Ricciali, and for sharing your expertise and insights with us today. So I think the seminar has really truly reminded us that language is much more than a tool of communication. It's a repository of history, identity, memory, and culture. So the discussion really that we have today and that you led really highlighted the important role that education, community engagement, can play in preserving, how can I call that? Linguistic diversity, while at the same time creating opportunities for future generation. So really, on behalf of the Fulbright community, I would like to thank you and everyone here today for contributing to this enriching conversation. So we hope that today's discussion really encourages us to continue reflecting on how language shapes our societies and how cultural and linguistic diversity can be a source of strength and mutual understanding. So, thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at the next Fulbright Enrichment Seminar.
Thank you
Thank you.
very much. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you for organizing Aliyun.
Of
And
course, of
it was a
course.
pleasure to be with you all.
My pleasure. Thank you for your availability. Thank you, guys, and all wishing everyone a very nice weekend. See you next
And
time.
please reach out anybody who would like to talk more.
Of course, of course. Adrian, I'm gonna send you the recording afterwards as soon as when I get it from Zoom.
Excellent. Thank
All
you.
right, sounds good. Bye.
Okay. Cabo Verde, riba lá.
Cabo Verde.
I'm gonna go put on my
All
jersey.
right, sounds good. Bye.